Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and boy, that wild train never ends. Now, this is actually some pretty good information for anybody looking at a really crappy situation. Yes, it seems as though the Department of Justice, the people who are supposed to be disclosing these Epstein files, are so bad that I guess cybersecurity people have found methods on unredacting it. Now, this is not similar to the situation we saw like a month ago, where people were able to just highlight black bars, copy and paste them into like Word, and they were able to get like actual unredacted things. No, this is actually a really, really, really intensive, nerdy video. So just kind of stick around, okay? We're going to get into a little bit of the weeds first, but I promise you it's going to be a little bit of an interesting ride going down. So a day ago, there was a researcher by the name of Mahmoud Al-Qudsi. Now, Mahmoud is an individual that, is a super nerd, okay? What we're going to talk about are fonts today, okay? The fonts we use to write videos, the fonts we use to, like, put text into video, fonts. The shit that goes A to Z on our desktop. Now, for instance, inside this actual research, he said that there's been a lot of complaints about the competency and the logic behind the latest Epstein release, which is true. There's actually been thousands of documents that have actually been removed simply because the government leaked out victims, unfortunately. Now, one of those things was actually on the Epstein Reddit, which they kind of are a group of individuals kind of looking through this stuff piece by piece. And one of the most disgusting things that I saw was this email from Jean-Luc. Okay, so for instance, Jean-Luc Brunel to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is an empty file, right? It's EFTA 01188505. Now, in this file over here, which has since been taken off, the disgusting parts were these images that were sort of released from the actual FBI, or the DOJ. Now, these images are of women. If I click one more check over, the actual images will be women completely naked, okay? Like, no clothes on, no nothing. Those are the pictures being sent. Now, according to the people looking at it, they're saying they found emails of girls apparently being sold. Now, because of this being kind of risky to look at, obviously the original data set, this is the link right over here. If you go to it, well, it seems like it's not there. Unfortunately, the victims of this are constantly being re-victimized because you bet your ass somebody downloaded this and stuck it on the dark web or even an archive website out there, which, unfortunately, all right, for the victims in this situation, it is what it is, okay? The government failed you, as they failed many people. But I'm more interested in this story of unredaction because I feel, maybe, just possibly, it could potentially lead to an actual serious sick fuck being exposed in this situation. Now again, there's a lot of good news to talk about, but this news over here, let's get back to it. So for instance, according to our friend Mahmoud over here, he was thinking of talking about the mangled quotable printing and coding. Now, what that was, remember last video we kind of looked at it and there were some emails, one that, to kind of correct, I saw that there's one email that had 9YO, which I thought was, a 9-year-old, but it probably is like a 19-year-old, simply because the equal sign in that section in the entire email was an encoding error with the OCR tools used for processing these like emails, right? Now, whether it's a 9 or 19-year-old or even a 29-year-old, I think the context of that image I was looking at was incredibly nefarious. So ultimately, I still think we should look into the person involved in that email chain and look for serious investigation there. But I wanted to correct myself for the record. So right over here, you can see that he mentioned something known as EFTA 004, 00459. So if we open that actual file over here, he's uploaded it to the Internet Archive, but you can see this on the Justice website as well. So from Boris Nikolik, hi Boris, thank you for this message. Were you able to change your meeting time and then your flight time as well? So, it looks like an email, but it's got its standard black bar redactions. Well, he mentions over here, the hex characters go on for 76 pages and represent the file dbc12 one-page invite with reply.pdf. Encoded as base64 so that it can be included in the email without breaking the SMTP protocol. Now, if you look carefully into this email, they talk a lot about base 64, which is this, if you look at these jumble of, words and text, a lot of this is how we kind of shared certain files hanging out in the sea, so to speak. I'm not going to get too deep into it, otherwise, I think I might get shut down. But anyways, this jumble is, from what the researcher is saying, is base 64. So those characters go on for 76 pages. So basically, converting it back to the original PDF is theoretically as easy as copy and pasting those 76 pages into a text editor, stripping the leading, bytes, and piping all of that into base64 output.pdf. Or it would be if we had the original badly converted email and not a partially redacted scan of a printout of said email with shoddy OCR applied. OCR being, again, the method that is used to take the image and take all of the readable text out. There's a lot of local artificial intelligences that just do this for you nowadays. Your phone pretty much does this for you. It's one of the reasons why you can take a photo of text on your iPhone, and after a second you can open up the photo and you can actually highlight, copy, and paste text because OCR has scanned the text into a readable, copyable format for you. Basically, over here was if you tried to copy the text as digitized by the DOJ from the PDF file into a text editor, here's what you would see. So again, all of that OCR'd in here. You can ignore the EFTA 004, 004, 59 on the second line. That, or some variant, will be interspersed into the base 64 text since it's stamped at the bottom of every single page. So here's what proper base 64 actually looks like. So this jumble, when it actually is thrown into a decoder, will spit out something that makes actual sense, right? It kind of looks like encrypted, jarbled stuff. It's like opening a program in the Notepad and just seeing all of the crazy way that Notepad has parsed a document that it can't properly read. So notice how in the sample, everything lines up perfectly when using a monoscoped font at the right margin. And how that's not the case when we copied and pasted from the OCR PDF. That's because it actually wasn't a great OCR job. Extra characters have been hallucinated into the output. Some of them not even legal base 64 characters, such as the comma and the right bracket or left bracket, while other characters have been omitted altogether, giving us content that we can't use. So basically, according to the researcher, he tried the easiest alternative, which was again to load this up in PDF and run the OCR process through Adobe Acrobat again. But there is a problem, right? Not every single bit of OCR is actually great. Not every single process runs fine. In fact, the best process that I think ended up coming out of this write-up was Amazon's Textract, which was their special formats. Now, this is where the nerd shit comes in. Basically, Mahmoud points out that the worst problem is that the text is rendered in possibly the worst typeface for the job at hand, Courier New. Now, I tend to disagree. They always made us use this shit in middle school when we were typing stuff up, so it is what it is. If you're a font enthusiast, which honestly I'm really not, okay, you're probably shaking with a mix of PTSD and rage. But for the benefit of everyone else, let's say that Courier New is not a great font. It was a digitization of the venerable Courier font face, commissioned by IBM in 1950. Courier was used for IBM typewriters, including the IBM Selectric, and in the 90s it was digitized directly from the golf ball of the IBM Selectric by Monotype and shipped with Windows 3.1. So again, we're getting into the points where we're talking about Windows 3.1 and fucking Windows Vista. So if you're already bowing out as a nerd, stick around just a little bit, okay? I'll dilute this down for the average Andy. If you really want to look into this, Mahmoud's page, neosmart.net blog, his blog actually has all of this. I would highly recommend you read through if you're a super nerd about this, okay? And I'm sure some of you watching definitely are. So basically, here's Courier and here's Courier New. So again, they were comparing the fonts, for instance, and more specifically, two letters in particular, two ones. You've got the 1 and you've got the L, okay? Now, if you're looking at it really closely, you don't have to have 20/20 vision to realize, whoa, somebody could fucking mistake that. What's the difference, Muda? Well, I guess this is the L, and the 1 has a bit of a dick curve at the top. Now, the combination of the two faults that they listed over here makes Courier New a terrible choice as a programming font. But as a font used for base 64 output you want to OCR, you really couldn't pick a worse option. To add fuel to the fire, you're looking at SVG outlines of the fonts, meticulously converted and preserving all the fine details. But in the Epstein files released by the DOJ, all they did was have low-quality JPEGs to deal with, right? So again, we have bad scans and terrible typeface to kind of deal with, okay? So again, the issue is pointed out even closer here. So if you kind of zoom in, it's a little bit difficult. You can see that obviously to the average person, trying to figure out what the fuck is an L or a 1 is a problem, okay? The government couldn't have done a figure 1 or an L or whatever. It's not that there isn't any difference between the two, because there is. And sometimes you get a clear gut feeling which is which. I was midway through manually typing out one line of base 64 when I got stuck on identifying a 1 versus L, only to realize at the same time I had confidently described one of them earlier the same, without even pausing to think which was which. So even if you think you're in the right, you gotta transcribe all this shit, realizing that to perfect this process, you have to be an expert. You have to make sure that nothing is wrong here. Now, ultimately, Mahmoud didn't stick through with this because, obviously, for this level of nerdiness, he had to basically set aside some time. But the idea was that if you're somebody that wants to use actual machine learning, not LLM crap, you can actually put together something, and some nerds are playing around with some local AI, some local machine learning patterns to actually transcribe all of this. And because the only process we can do to actually convert some of these redactions is through literally nothing other than pure brute force now. Basically, the challenge now is, can you manage to recreate the original PDF from that base 64 output included in the dump? It can't be that hard, can it? Can you find other attachments included in the dumps that might also be possible to reconstruct? Unfortunately, the contractor that developed the full text search for the DOJ did a pretty crappy job. And that's just the thing. When you spot one crappy job done, okay, maybe, just maybe, there are other fail points that we could take advantage of. Anything to help identify some sickos that are actually being protected by the government. Because honestly, if the government can just victimize victims again, they should never get away with protecting anybody that is an actual predator in this case. Come on now. Now, again, the point of this is, like, we can't unredact every single file, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. The reality of the redaction process is they've already fucked up the redactions. I even mentioned it in the last video talking about this, where there were actual duplicates of a file where, again, some things were redacted in one file, but they weren't clearly redacted in another. So whoever was doing this clearly didn't put much thought into it. But for the actual DOJ who let these base 64 files go around, again, the important aspect of this is, if you can pull these attachments that are given out in base 64, and you're able to absolutely deal with the bad scans, and once you can get past that L or 1 issue and deal with these shitty fonts that are being used, if all the stars kind of align and, you know, sort of the meat is there, you could possibly rebuild what's in these attachments, from my understanding, through the actual base 64, which I guess the government decided to just leave out there. Now, while they're scrambling to remove anything that was unredacted, I think it's interesting to note that, you know, if these are documents, for instance, right, or possible, you know, pieces of evidence that we can use to expose really sick individuals, that's where the focus should kind of be. So I told you there was a lot of nerd shit to talk about, and, you know, I might have even gotten a few aspects of this wrong, because when we're getting into the font stuff, it's like hella nerdy for me. But I thought it was interesting to bring up because, hey, look, you know, obviously I have a severe interest in these files, as I'm pretty sure many other people do. And look, for the government who wants us to sort of look away now that I guess these have been out there, there's more questions than anybody has had before. And the more you look into it, the more you realize that, listen, there were two ways. I was probably not going to make this video because I'm already kind of black-pilled on it enough. But there actually have been investigations that have been started in other parts of the world. Now, even in America, where the DOJ is kind of sitting on their ass doing nothing, The reality of it is there are law enforcement agencies in the United Kingdom. I think France might have started something. I've heard murmurs in Turkey, heard stuff in Norway. A lot of other countries are actually reopening investigations into this, network and sort of looking closely at the people in their nations that are attracted to this guy. I hope that there's actually something in Canada that might start because of this too, because there have been Canadians that have been implicated in this situation as well too. So you look, there are some positives that are coming out of the situation. I don't want to make these videos to sort of just anger you, because I think anger is important, but there also needs to be a glimmer of hope somewhere in these stories. And the hope is that the government, of the United States has done such a dogshit job at the disclosure anyways, that the files that they've released, and they're currently scrambling to remove some of them because they've made genuine mistakes, whether that be that they've re-victimized somebody or they let something out that they didn't want to. One thing that I have learned is that if you are somebody at the DOJ, like you are somebody at the FBI, there is not a single person out right now that has not leaked this stuff. Like somebody, if you care at all about justice, you should come out and leak this information, unredacted, specifically the people that have actually, committed crime. I'm not saying that you unredact really illegal stuff or the victim, so to speak, but any of these perpetrators that are having their names hidden, you should leak that. It is your duty to do so. But right now, it seems like basically everybody in the government is complicit, and the job itself looks so poorly done that some people have theorized that it's probably just like interns, I shit you not, at the DOJ or the fucking government who are putting these files up and not realizing, the mistakes that they're putting out there. But the thing is, once something is posted on the internet, mistakes are already there, okay? It's time to pack it up, boys, and look closer into the situation. So yeah, you know what? One thing that you should never ignore is the nerdy, autistic nature of the internet, okay? Once they've latched onto something, they will see it through to the end. There's nothing you can do about it. But the big positive part about this is, I think with these file disclosures, something that I've seen in the last 48 hours is new investigations that are opening up. Now, whether these investigations lead anywhere, that's a different story. I mean, we'll see that as time, comes, all right? Whether people get arrested, whether they don't, we'll see it as time but it's happening, instead of the largest country in the world that stand as the paragon of justice and virtue, kind of, shying away from the situation and trying to move on as poorly as they can, a lot of other countries and their leadership are thankfully more ballsy than that, and they're standing up and they're looking closer at a really sick, evil network that, has been the talk of the town since 2016. It's not that people want to talk about this because it's just that engrossing. I think it's because, with all of the shit that we've ever covered on this channel specifically, even if it's not been, like, when we looked at things like Club Penguin, when we looked at all these crazy predator networks on the internet and these sick pedophiles and stuff, when we talked about things like Pizzagate and QAnon and all that shit, I think it's insane that now when we're sitting at actual evidence and paperwork that proves that there is a secret, sick, elite pedo cabal, that nothing is happening. We can't let that happen. Justice needs to be served. And thankfully, there might be a path for nerds to look up information and expose some real sickos that the government is trying to protect, in my opinion, of course. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.